things I want to say is if you're thinking about it, keep your expectations very low to begin with, and think of it as an experiment. That way you won't be horribly disappointed and frustrated, and you won't end up with $100 worth of tapping and processing equipment that you're never going to use because you hate maple trees. So, and it is fun. It's time consuming. It can be time consuming, but it's just a great pastime, and you get delicious syrup, and you can make sugar from your syrup. You can make what they call maple cream or maple butter, which is, I call it maple crack. It's just a wonderful thing. My goal has been to gradually replace any refined white sugar I have with maple sugar, and I expect I'm still a couple of years away from that. But we'll see. We use quite a bit of maple sugar right now, and cutting down on our processed white sugar. And so the things, this is actually a really good time to talk about tapping, because our season is coming up in November, probably the end of November. As soon as the leaves fall, you can start to think about tapping. And our tapping season goes to budburst, which is usually in March. So compared to the Eastern sugar maple, it's a fairly long season. However, there are conditions that can cause the sap maybe not to flow, or to flow very poorly. And what I have found is usually the best tapping time period is usually into January through February. Sometimes I've been really lucky and have gotten good flow in December, which is fabulous because it makes really good Christmas presents. So first thing you want to do is ID and tag your trees. I assume everybody knows what our native big leaf maples look like. Okay. Easy, you know, the leaves are as big as your head, and wonderful trees. Oh, you know, one thing about the big leaf maple is in the spring, you know, when they get those long flowers. Have you seen them?
Yes.
Pick them and eat them. They're delicious.
Oh, really? Wow.
Oh, they are so good. Pick them when they're pretty, when the buds are pretty tight on the little flowers. Because if you wait until they get open and hairy, then they're not, the mouthfeel isn't so great. The taste is still there, but the mouthfeel isn't so great. But oh, they're delicious. You can even do fritters with them. We put them on salads and just eat them right off the tree. They're really good.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Okay. So ID and tag your trees.
Maple tapping.
You want to have a tree that's at least waist high, 4-inch diameter. Although I've kind of cheated a couple times.
Oh, that we're not right out here.
And you know, sometimes you'll find these big, I call them hobbit trees. They're these big old big leaf maples that have bark that's about 2 inches thick. Sometimes, you know, they look really inviting. They think, oh my gosh, that's going to produce a lot of sap. Sometimes these older trees just won't do it. However, some of them will. And if you get a big old tree with really thick bark, before I tap or drill the hole, I'll knock off a patch of bark with a chisel. Okay, so ID and tag your trees. Think about in bad weather, if your trees are a ways from your house, think about making sure the trail is good and you won't be stumbling, which I have with a bucket full of sap. If you are thinking about getting some equipment, either for just an experiment or whatever, you need to probably start looking at the equipment now. Amazon has a great selection of different spiles. Those are the little taps that we hammer into the trees. And Clifford, if I'm not mistaken, after the previous presentation, I sent you information on resources,
Yeah,
a list of resources. Do you still have that?
I probably, because I don't throw anything away, but
Okay. Well,
yeah,
if you don't, let me know, because you can share this again with these folks. And on that list of resources is a book that if you're going to get a book, and it's around $20, I think, and you can get it off Amazon. It's Big Leaf Sugaring, I think it's called, Tapping the Western Maple. And it's by a Canadian named Gary Backlund, Backlund. And that's kind of the Bible for big leaf maple tapping. He gives you all the information you need very clearly. This guy has been doing it, well, the Canadians have been tapping big leaf maples for years and years. Vancouver Island has a good industry going with big leaf maple syrup.
Can you repeat the title and author again, please?
Okay, the author is Gary Backlund, Backlund. And I believe the title is Big Leaf Sugaring.
Sugaring.
Tapping the Western Maple.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. So again, if you're thinking of equipment or that book, get it now. As with a lot of agricultural items, people are quick to grab them up right now. So do that.
Can you ask her if the tapping equipment is different from the?
so Marilyn,
So
send me that. I can
yes.
send that out too,
Probably different.
because
Okay.
I can't find it right now.
Cool. I will totally do that. And there is some information that I had sent to Clifford previously, and I'll copy that and send it to him, and he can send it out to y'all. One of the best things to know, and I know Janie, who's not on here tonight, she has done some tapping. So one of the best ways to learn about tapping is to have somebody come out and show you how to do it, or go to somebody's place that does it. And I in the Kitsap County area, there are a couple of people off the top of my head that would be sure and do it in a safe social distancing way, and I'll send that information also. I'm absolutely willing to come out to your place, or we can arrange to have you come out to mine, and we can go through an actual demonstration. I will probably this year, depending on the weather, I'm going to set out some, because I have some new trees that I'm going to tap this year. So I'm going to set out some test taps, probably around the first part of December, unless we have a really unusual cold snap at the end of November, which I don't foresee, but you never know. And I found the best flow, if you get into a good flow, it's usually after a significant barometric pressure change. It doesn't necessarily have to be a freeze and a thaw. It can be a rainstorm. One of my, and this is kind of along the lines of, it will probably become an old wives' tale, but what I have looked for in the last 7-8 years is look at your buds after the leaves fall. Look at those little tight buds. And when they start just looking like they're just a wee bit, just the tiniest bit swollen, I have found that kind of signals to me that tree is going to be giving me some sap pretty soon. Now, that being said, not all my trees have followed that rule, but for the most part, that's what I look for. And that's what the beauty of doing something like this is. You kind of get to know your land, you get to know your trees, and it's just a lovely activity.
Marilyn, how many trees do you tap?
Oh, it varies wildly with the amount of energy I have and the sap flow I'm getting from my test taps. I usually have, the last 6-7 years, I've probably averaged about 15-20 taps. Now, some of the trees I have more than one tap, some of the larger trees, and you can do that. You just have to be careful not to tap in the same place where you tapped previously. Did that answer?
Yes, it did.
Okay. And, that's the other thing. Do as I say, not as I do, because I've always thought I kept a log for a number of years about how many gallons of sap per tree I got and in what month and blah, 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 blah. And then I just thought, there's a reason I'm not a bookkeeper. But you can do that if you want, especially if you're thinking about a more expansive production scenario. Okay, you want to kind of keep track. And the weather conditions, I do kind of keep track of the weather conditions, especially in really good flow seasons, because I like to look back and say, the weather did this, the flow was really good, so I might look for this year. Normally you can keep your taps in. I don't like to keep them in longer than a couple of weeks because the tree will start healing. And it will cut off your flow if you do get a flow. So what you can do in that case, if you're waiting for a flow, say it's a test tap, if you're waiting for a flow, nothing's coming, and you think it should, you can kind of re-drill the hole and put the tap back in. And I would, when you drill the tap hole, it's going to be at a very slight angle. So when you remove the tap, it lets kind of everything flow out. So in other words, you aren't going to get contaminated anything going into that hole. And that being said, when you put your taps in, make sure your taps are clean. I usually use a white vinegar solution to clean my taps, and or you can even use Listerine. Listerine's a really good disinfectant. Your drill bit and your taps, make sure they're very clean, because you don't want to introduce any germs into the tree itself. The trees heal pretty quickly. I was just looking at a couple of my trees this morning. Some years they're kind of slow to heal, but gosh, this last year, man, those holes closed right up, which I was really happy to see. And I have one tree that has been my star tree for many, many years. I've decided to give it a rest this year. But every year if my other trees are not flowing or flowing poorly, this tree gives me lots of sap every single year. Wow. It's great. And then I've had a tree that was my star tree for 2 years. And the last 4 years, I haven't gotten a drop of sap from it. So it can be tricky. The trees on our property are fairly widely spaced, and the ground they're in is from one to the next can be radically different. Like on top of our hill, we're in a sand pile. I mean, it's just a big sand mound, and it's not till you get to the bottom of our property that we get to some fairly nice soil. But however, my best producing trees are in that sandy soil. So anyway, and that's another thing to keep track of, write it down, and there will be years. We had a year, maybe 5-6 years ago, where the flow all up and down the West Coast, even in Canada, nobody got a decent flow. So the syrup production was pretty low, and those years will happen.
What would you consider a good flow for a tap? What would you consider a good flow for a tap?
Well, okay, that's a really good question, because it can vary wildly. What I consider a good flow or a decent flow is if I get half a gallon in 12 hours.
Wow.
Thank you.
Now, I've had flows where I couldn't keep up with it.
Wow.
They filled my gallon containers it was like pouring out of the tree.
Wow.
And it did that for about a week. I mean, I was just, and that's another thing. You can find yourself in a situation, especially if you're not prepared, where you have all this sap,
No.
and maybe not a really efficient place to do your boil down. You're not prepared for a big boil down, and I wasn't that year. So the sap can be used for a lot of things. It makes lovely tea. You can use it to boil your noodles or your rice, or
Wow.
it's even good to drink. Little ice in it, and it's lovely. Not
drink
much
it right
taste,
out
and
of
it
the
looks like rainwater. But and this last year I made a lovely sourdough starter with the with some maple sap.
Wow.
So lots of things you can do with it. They even I've seen the product in Canada. They sell bottled maple water, maple sap, and it's really expensive. Who knew?
So can you drink it right out of it?
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah,
cold
you
out,
can.
you can drink it?
Yeah.
Sure.
Nice.
Yeah, there's no, the trees are pretty, unless you have a horrible bacterial problem going, and you'll know if it's that. And the thing to look for in sap, of course, is number one, clarity. If you've got some real cloudiness in there, you've got a bacteria problem. A lot of times it is because you left it in the container too long. Because we're in a temperate climate, and it warms up more than your traditional sugar maples where they live do. You need to collect that sap pretty quickly. And on some of my trees, I started using a drop line, which is tubing connected to the spile, and then it goes down into your collection apparatus, whether you have a bucket or a jug or whatever. And I didn't keep the tubing clean enough. I should have been like washing it out every couple days, and I ended up with some soured sap, which was too bad because it was a tree that really flowed well. So I try not to use drop lines at all. To me, unless you're going to go into a huge production, or you're Johnny on the spot and keep that equipment really clean, and be aware of the temperature. If it gets up above 40 at all, you're going to be in trouble.
Just stored in the refrigerator. Is that pretty stored?
So in storing, until this season, my husband broke down and purchased a small commercial evaporator for us, and it's really great. It's called the StarCat, and it's not for huge production, but it's going to cut my processing down, golly, by more than half. So I'm really excited, and it's really a cute setup. But previous to that, my boil down was done on an old wood cook stove outside, and several flat pans. You want your pans as shallow and as wide as you can get, because what you're doing is you're evaporating all that water, right? So you want to have a big surface area. You can do it in narrower pots, it just takes longer. So anyway, I'm pretty excited, and I, Murphy's Law, there won't be a sap flow this year, so I won't get to try out my StarCat. Whatever. I can still look at it. Okay, so far, any questions?
Is your commercial one electric or wood or
No, it's wood fired. I consider electric cheating. No, it's wood fire. It's a sweet little firebox, and then the flat pan sits on top, and I have a feeder pan for it. It's really great and has a spigot, so I can draw off my syrup as it comes to syrup stage.
Off of one
How
tree
long does it take?
does decently, how much sap in a couple of weeks' time would you expect on a decent flow?
Good question.
And then
Couple
how
weeks.
much would it go down?
I would,
How long does it take?
wow. I'd like at least 30 gallons.
Oh,
Now, see, that's where the tediousness comes in the boil down. The Brix reading on big leaf maple sap runs anywhere from 1 to maybe 3, and it averages about 1.5 probably. So you're going to have, to get a gallon of syrup, you're going to have to produce, and a gallon of syrup goes a long ways. I don't want to put that down, but you're going to have, depending on what your Brix reading is on the sap, 40 to 60 gallons of sap to get 1 gallon of syrup.
40 to 60. Yeah.
And this last season, we were real fortunate. Man, I got a number of my trees came up with a 3% Brix reading on the sap, which was lovely. I was really excited about that. And then you boil it down. I have a Brix refractometer, such as they use for winemaking and other fruit processing things to test the sugar content. And you want to get one, a refractometer, and I think it was only about $30, but it's lovely because you can, when you do the boil down, you can boil it down to exactly where you want it without guessing with the temperature. And I say guessing with the temperature because theoretically, if you boil your sap down to the syrup stage, it's going to be 7 degrees above the boiling point of water. So you want to boil it down to at least 219. Okay, and that's a good rule of thumb, but if you want to get really, I want syrup, get that refractometer, and you can test it and get it up to, I think, I usually go 67.5 is just the perfect consistency for us. And that's kind of fun too. I like all these scientific scientific things.
I'd like to know the difference.
And
These from the
if,
investment.
if any of you have grandchildren, nieces, nephews, children, whatever, it's a great thing to do with kids. It's so much fun, and it's magical to them. So, any other questions?
I want to know what the difference is between East Florida
Good.
and West Florida.
If you're boiling them down, how long might you expect to be boiling? Like days?
Okay.
41 to
So
40.
on my dinosaur setup out on the wood stove, because it's so inefficient. Number one, it's not an airtight stove, so the heat is not produced in an efficient manner to the pot. So I had to surround my pots with fire brick, which helped a little bit. And to answer that question a little bit more, I wouldn't start a boil down until I had at least 10 gallons of sap. 10 gallons of sap to me with that setup was a good it was an amount I could handle with 3 pots on the stove. And depending on how good the fire was going, I would probably, with 10 gallons, I would probably be out there for 10, 12 hours.
Okay.
Number one, because as the pots boil down, you have to keep adding sap, right?
Mhm.
And as your amount goes down to where you can put it in one pot and then a smaller pot and not, and usually I would get it to about 40, 50 bricks, and then I'd bring that inside because my finished product would be a little bit under a quart usually. So I would finish it inside because that way I could really keep an eye on it in a smaller pot. And you do have to keep an eye on it because you can ruin an entire batch in seconds. I've done it a lot. Well, only 3 times, but it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So you call it blackened syrup and let it go?
Oh, well, your pot is ruined. It's just,
Oh,
it's
man.
just horrible. And then you have that acrid smell. And you're depressed for days. And, getting back to the whether your sap is good or not, of course, look for cloudiness. The color can be a little bit different for the different trees. It can be clear as rainwater, which is pretty normal here. I have a couple of trees that give kind of a, not amber, it's lighter than amber, just a kind of real light,
Yellowish.
pale yellow color. And as long as it's not cloudy, you should be okay. But hey, if you are, if you're questioning at all, if the sap is good or has an off flavor, boil down a little bit separately and taste it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you're accumulating enough to work with, do you store it in the refrigerator or do you freeze
Yeah.
it? What do you
If
do?
I'm only going to be saving it for a couple days, the refrigerator is great. If it's going to be more than that, I will put it in gallon freezer bags and stick it in the freezer. Um, yeah, to avoid that. So yeah, that's a good question because you do have to think about storage
One tap in each tree.
with that.
Oh, more than one tap. Yes.
Any other questions?
Yeah. I have a question.
Yep.
Can you put more than one tap in one tree, or is it only one tap per tree?
Well,
Will it hurt the tree?
one tap per tree is the rule of thumb.
Okay.
Especially if it's a younger tree.
Okay.
The bigger trees, you can put 2 taps in comfortably.
Okay.
And
Does it
by
hurt the
bigger,
tree?
no,
Okay.
it doesn't hurt the tree.
Okay.
The bigger trees, I would say 12-inch diameter and up, you can get away with 2 taps.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. And again, before I would put another tap in a tree, I would wait and see if that tree is going to flow for you.
Wait.
Yeah, before you start drilling more holes. Although I have a big hobbit tree at the end of our driveway, and oh man, that thing it's got some battle scars, but it still produces.
Good. Can the tree ever be too big? Can you ever have too large of a tree?
Yeah, as I said previously, many times those really old, huge trees with a real thick bark may not be good producers.
Okay.
Number one, their bark is thick, and if I'm going to tap one of those, I usually like to tap real low.
Okay.
And that's another one of this works for me. And I will knock off the bark before a little patch of bark before I drill my tap hole.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, some of those older trees can be good producers, and some of them just won't.
Okay.
And that's where, if you have a couple trees on your place, this peninsula is just full of big leaf maple. And dollars to donuts, your neighbor has 20 big leaf trees that they don't know what to do with, and
Yeah.
do a project with them.
Okay.
Or a lot of people are just, yeah, go ahead, tap them, I don't care.
As long as it doesn't hurt the tree.
And I tapped the beginning of this last season. An old 4-H member of mine, her family wanted to tap some of their trees, so I went out to their place, and they of course had some big leaf maple trees, but they also had a big old Norway maple tree in their front yard, which turned out to be a fabulous producer. So if you have any of those maple trees, the sugar maple, the red maple, I think there's a black maple, the Norway maple, you absolutely can tap them.
Wow. That's cool to know.
Any other questions? All right, quiet group. So again, a great thing to do with kids, great thing to do with your family. You know, um, I was thinking, I wish I would have had some of my grandkids with me last season. I tapped a couple of maples down at the bottom of our property, and it's quite a hike down there and quite a hike up. And this one tree, I thought, you know, I haven't tapped this before. I'll just see. And I put one of my larger buckets for a container. I went down the next day and that stinking bucket was full.
Wow.
I had to carry it all the way back up. So that's something to think about. And you can use anything for a container. My favorite ones still are just repurposed plastic milk jugs. And you just either put a hole in the cap of it and use a drop line, a short drop line from the spile, if you have one of those spiles, or if you have an old-fashioned spile that's pretty thick, just cut a hole where the top of the milk jug starts slanting upwards. Cut a hole and then hang it on the spile, and that makes a great container for the sap. You just have to remember when you take it off the spile and pour the sap into a bigger container that the hole is there.
Yeah. I'll pour that other side.
Do you ever have any concerns about rainwater diluting it?
And no, well, I have had concerns, but if you, like with my milk jug containers, I have no concern because it's pretty tight. And the way most of the spiles you're going to see are, you aren't going to have rainwater contamination except in your catching container. And gosh, I use everything from just little plastic buckets that I also drill a hole in, and to the big old-fashioned galvanized sap buckets you see in old-time photos. I have some of those, and those are actually great, but I have to line them with a food safe bag, otherwise you get a metallic taste. Anyway, so with those, and they do have a lid, but the lid isn't tight. So I will take the top of that bag that I have in there that's folded over, and I will put it over the spile and the lid. So if it is raining, the rain won't get in the sap.
Do you recommend a certain type of spile?
Well, they have, I think they're called Ecolo, or that's the name of the company. It's what they call a tree saver sap or spile, and they're plastic. I don't like them because I can't. They make you make a smaller hole with them. And with some trees, if I'm going to use any kind of a drop line or any kind of tubing, I will use those because it's just a little faucet that comes down from the plastic spile, and that's great. But for whatever reason, they seem to get clogged more than others. So I like the big old-fashioned stainless steel ones. You use with the smaller spiles, you'll use a a 5/16 inch bit, and with the larger old-fashioned ones, you use a 7/16 inch bit. So it does make a larger hole, but my flow just seems to always be better with those old-fashioned ones. And you know, those are the kinds of spiles that I started out with. So it's like, you know, as I get older, it's difficult for me to change. They have some newer stainless steel spiles that are just, it just looks like a tube, a regular tube, that I haven't tried, that I want to try. But I kind of like the thought of the metal ones as opposed to the plastic ones, and I don't know why.
Thank you.
But you'll see a variety of spiles if you go on Amazon. Just plug in maple tapping supplies, and you'll get all sorts of good ideas. And you know, buy a couple different kinds. See what you like.
Okey-doke.
Marilyn, when you're cooking them, the sap down, do you have to stir it continuously or nearly continuously
You do not stir it.
at all?
You do not stir it.
That's
Oh,
good to know.
Just boils down.
you just have to watch so it doesn't get too thick. Okay.
Yeah.
What happens if you do stir it? Is there some reason why you don't?
There's just no point, because you want to keep it at not a full rolling boil, but a good steady boil, between a simmer and a rolling boil.
Okay.
You just don't need to. There's nothing in there to really stir,
Okay.
unless you have. That's the other thing. You're going to get, at some point when you're making syrup, you're going to get some sediment happening. And I do an initial shoot, what's the word I'm looking for? Filter of the sap. As I'm putting it in the whatever I'm boiling it in. Okay, so I'll filter the sap, and then I'll just boil it down. And you can boil for a while and then take it off the heat and leave it. But what's going to happen is you're going to get, if you bring it back up to temperature again to finish your boil down, you're going to get a tremendous amount of sediment.
What? Oh, sediment.
Okay, the more you do that, the more sediment you get. Normally you're going to have a little bit of sediment or sugar sand. Some years worse than others, but you can avoid that by keeping your boil till you get to syrup temperature. Now, if I know I'm going to have some, well, and I normally do this anyway, the sediment doesn't hurt. It just looks awful, and it makes a good facial scrub. It doesn't hurt anything, but it you know, it looks nasty, and sometimes the sediment is pretty flocculent. So what I'll do in that case is I will, with the finished syrup that has a lot of sediment in it, I will leave it in a jar and just let everything settle. And then I'll siphon it off, the good syrup without the sediment off the top. Put it in a pot and bring it up to 190 on the stove. No more than that. You don't want to bring it back to boiling, because you're going to get sediment again. Okay, So then I'll transfer it after it's up to 185, 190. I'll transfer it to my sterilized jars.
How long can you store it?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, is that the sediment that you're boiling up to 190 or the other?
No. The good syrup I siphoned off of the sediment,
Okay,
because your sediment, of course, is going to sink to the bottom,
right.
right? You might have to leave it for a day or so.
Okay, got it.
And you may not even care.
So are you canning it then eventually?
You can,
Store it.
if you're worried about it, you can go ahead and process it for a few minutes. I don't, I get, they are actually hot sauce bottles. I have 5 ounce and I have 15 ounce bottles with new caps. And I'll sterilize those and just filter my syrup into those jars, and the caps will seal, and it's good to go.
Last a year.
And you know, even with if you've made some syrup and you're going to use it right away, put it in a jar and put it in the refrigerator. It'll last. You'll know right away if you haven't brought it up to a good syrup stage, say above 60 Brix, you'll get mold in your syrup pretty quickly. If you get it above 68, 69 Brix, what you're going to get is a lot of sugar crystals.
You microwave those down.
Which is no big deal. The mold is the thing you have to, and that's still no big deal. It's actually a very safe product. And you'll know right away if your syrup is bad, because it turns into light slime. But it takes a long time for it to do that.
Slime. Maple slime.
Yeah, ooh, it's nasty. But it takes an awful long time to do that. It's a pretty safe product.
Does the
it's good.
sap taste sweet?
Not really. It really just tastes like really good water.
Okay. I'll have to give it a try.
Yeah, and one of the first questions, well, this was actually years ago. I haven't had this question for a very long time, but one of the first questions I used to get was, well, what do you have to add to it?
Right.
You know, it's just, they couldn't conceive of
Tree juice.
adding
to go
nothing.
Get into syrup. Okay.
And they're, you know, and I encourage you, even if you're not going to tap your native maple, use maple syrup, real maple syrup, cook with it. It's just a wonderful product. There's so many recipes, and I'll send you, I'll include some recipes for you guys.
Oh, great. Great.
For maple syrup.
Okay.
It just, when I'm doing experimenting with cooking with maple syrup, I don't want to use
Your product.
my fig leaf
I know.
until I know that the recipe is good. So I will break down and buy some commercial maple syrup. So, and I encourage you to do the same. It's just so much better for you. Lots of
Okay,
good
we need to do that.
minerals.
Okay. We'll have to taste the blossoms and the syrup.
Oh, the blossoms, really. They're,
Yeah, we have lots of maples around here. Many, many. We'll get lots of blossoms.
yeah. Oh, they're so good.
Okay.
So, any other questions?
What do the blossoms taste like?
Hey, that's a
Not
good question.
chicken.
No, not chicken. To me, it was kind of a cross between a good arugula and I want to say romaine.
So it's like lettuce.
So kind of,
Lettuce you taste.
So it go good on a salad.
oh, they're lovely on a salad.
All right.
Well, that's all I got, folks.
All right. Thank you.
Do you have a contact point in case we have a real bad question for you?
Absolutely. You want my email?
That would be great.
Okay, I'm going to type it in the chat.
Okay. That'd be great. Thank you.
Just put that right there. Just gonna type it in. You can copy it.
Yeah, email me anytime.
Oh,
Is that one?
And again, with the resources that I'm going to send to Clifford, I'll put a couple names of Kitsap County area folks that are tapping. You can contact them. You can contact me anytime. I would be happy to come help, or
could you send that address, the email address to Clifford there, because it went away before I could copy it.
okay, I will do that.
Thank you.
Let me see if I can make it big. Control.
I can put it in the minutes.
Okay,
Okay.
that'd be good.
Okay.
Click your chat button again, Mel.
Say again, please.
Click your chat button on the bottom there,
Uh,
and that should open the chat box up to the right.
I don't know which one it is. What is it?
Ah. That
No,
one
I
works.
don't know how to do it.
You want me to write it down on a piece of paper and I'll hold it up to the screen?
Sure.
That'd be great if you could do that.
You guys are high maintenance, man.
We're old.
Beginners. Yeah. Okay.
And if you click on speaker view, she talks while she does it. You'll be able to see it even clearer.
Can you see that?
All right, so there you go.
There it is. Oh, very good. Brennan. Brennan, just like Brennan. MPO Brennan. And hotmail.com. Hotmail.com.
Y'all got it?
Yes.
Yep.
MPO, right?
Yep,
Okay.
all lowercase.
All lowercase. Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Movies.
And good, who knows? Maybe someday when we get out of this
Yeah. Virus.
mess we're in, we can have a maple syrup festival here in Western
That'd
Washington.
be great.
Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
And I would expect the Peninsula Fruit Club to be one of the sponsors.
Ooh.
Just warning you now.
That'd be fun.
Would be fun. All
All
right.
right, folks.
Alrighty. Well, good
I'll send that
night.
stuff
Thank
off
you
to
very much,
Clifford.
Gail, for the presentation.
Yes, thank you for the
Bet.
presentation.
You bet. Thank you for
Yeah, and they're gonna shut it off.
suffering through. And it's nice to see some of you again.
All right. And if anybody anybody else have anything else to bring up, we'll close the meeting. Nobody has any more questions?
No?
Nope.
Going once, going twice. We'll see you all next month on a Zoom meeting.
All right.
Take care. Goodbye.
You take care too.
Thank you.
Bye. Shut it off.
How do you turn it off?
Just wait, just wait. They turn it off and then you just push the little thing.